Welcome, everyone, to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time, Hood fought in the Battle of Gettysburg and was wounded. Now we follow Hood as he goes to the Western Theater. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. John Bell Hood recovered quickly from his wounds at Gettysburg. As soon as he felt up to it, he traveled to Richmond, Virginia to convalesce there. With his arm in a sling, he visited the homes of Richmond socialites and spent time with the eligible ladies of Richmond, particularly Sally Buchanan Preston, known to her friends as Buck. She had caught his eye when he was around Richmond during the Suffolk campaign earlier in the year, and he continued to try and court the young lady when he returned to Richmond. But she had many suitors, and as one contemporary wrote, she liked them more when they were away than when they were near. A rumor went around that if one sought Buck's hand, that it would lead to disaster. 3 of her suitors had been killed, 2 of them in the war. Hood was in Richmond when Robert E. Lee dispatched James Longstreet and part of his corps to the Western Theater to join the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Longstreet brought Hood's division and McLaws' division with him. Hood's division was commanded by Evander Law after Hood's wounding, but Longstreet wanted South Carolinian Micah Jenkins to take command of it. The tumult between Longstreet, Jenkins, and Law was cooled for the moment when Hood's men asked him to join them on their trip west. Hood agreed, and that settled the issue of whom would command Hood's troops. Before leaving, Hood met with Buck and asked her to marry him. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. Hood left her side saying, "I am engaged to you," and her saying back, "I am not engaged to you." The men traveled by railroad through the Carolinas and into Georgia. At the town of Ringgold, with some of his men already along Chickamauga Creek, facing the Union Army of the Cumberland. Hood didn't wait for a loading ramp to take his horse named Jeff Davis off the train, but instead jumped with him from the train car and mounted him, riding toward his troops. On September 19th, Hood's brigades of Henry Benning, Law, and Jerome Robertson attacked the Union right flank, but came under terrific fire and couldn't throw back the Union defenders on the rise. Hood's horse, Jeff Davis, was wounded and taken to the rear while Hood got another mount. That night, Hood rode to Army headquarters as he had been accustomed to doing in Lee's army and reported the fighting of the day. He found the commanders downtrodden, unable to see victory as a possibility. He met with John C. Breckinridge, the former Vice President of the United States, and voiced his opinion that he believed the Yankees would be whipped the next day. Breckinridge said, "My dear Hood, I am delighted to hear you say so. You give me renewed hope. God grant that it may be so." Hood also met with Longstreet, who had the optimism of Hood. Hood was happy because he was the first general I had met since my arrival who talked of victory. Hood shared a tent that night with his friend Simon Bolivar Buckner. The next day, the Army of Tennessee commander Braxton Bragg had divided his army in half, with Leonidas Polk, the warrior bishop of the Confederacy, commanding the right, and Longstreet commanding the left. Hood still remained in Longstreet's half of the army, meaning that Hood would help command Longstreet's corps, with Evander Law commanding Hood's division. During the Battle of Chickamauga on September 20th, miscommunication on the Union side resulted in a gap being formed. Coincidentally, Longstreet's half of the army was headed straight for that gap. Hood busted through the hole and began to push his troops deep into the Union line. While encouraging his men to continue the attack, Hood was approached by Robertson to see if Hood had any other orders for his Texans. Robertson watched as Hood's reins dropped from his hands and he slid from his saddle. Hood's last orders to his Texans were, "Go ahead and keep ahead of everything." Hood was taken from the field on a stretcher. A bullet had smashed the femur in his right leg a few inches below his hip. It was amputated by Dr. T.G. Richardson. He remained in Georgia for a while, recuperating, but the young Hood recovered quickly, as he did from his arm wound, but one could tell he was having a tougher time with the amputation of his leg. Just a few days after Chickamauga, Longstreet wired the Confederate War Department and recommended Hood for promotion to lieutenant general. Soon, Hood felt well enough to go to Richmond to see what he believed was his fiancée. She didn't welcome him the way he had probably hoped. That winter they played a cat-and-mouse game of love, as Hood would chase and Buck would dodge his proposals. Hood even tried to get her attention by commenting on how many suitors he had in the city. When she heard this, jealousy came over her, and she inquired as to who they were. When she heard the names, she rattled off a few of her own suitors to make Hood jealous. The one-legged general responded, "I think I will set a man trap near your door and break some of those young fellows' legs." Through the winter, Hood and Buck attended get-togethers alongside one another. From outward appearances, it seemed as if they were a couple, but Buck was always resistant to tie herself down to Hood. Hood also occupied himself with President Jefferson Davis, being a constant in his and First Lady Varina Davis's lives that winter. Hood had been bitten hard by the bug of promotion, and he courted a higher position. When the Army of Tennessee, then outside of Dalton, Georgia, needed a new corps commander since Leonidas Polk was transferred to Mississippi, Davis moved to send Hood to fill that position. Before he left, Hood and Buck went for a ride, where Hood held out his hand. "Don't do that," she snapped. Hood insisted that she say yes or no, that he couldn't take anything else. She consented, and Hood went to ask her father for her hand in marriage. Hood set off for Georgia, and fame, he hoped. He was now lieutenant general, taking command of a corps, and the spring campaign season would open very soon. May 1864 saw the Union Army Group under William T. Sherman move against the Army of Tennessee. Hood, his fellow corps commander William Hardee, and Army Commander Joseph E. Johnston pulled back toward Resaca, Georgia. Hood held his own at the Battle of Resaca, then the Army pulled back again. Outside of Cassville, Georgia, Johnston wanted to turn on the pursuing Federals and, using Hood's corps, destroy part of Sherman's army group as it marched along multiple routes. The normally aggressive Hood attempted to launch the desired attack, but claimed he found Federals on his flank and decided not to advance. The Confederate Army continued to pull back. At a series of battles at Dallas, New Hope Church, and Pickett's Mill, the rebels held off Sherman's advances. Johnston sent Hood to the right, following Pickett's Mill, to drive the Federals back, but again, he deemed it too difficult and opted not to launch an attack. Once again, the Army of Tennessee fell back, but this time they occupied Kennesaw Mountain. Their position was more than formidable, and Hood was on the Confederate left near a place called Kolb's Farm. In an attempt to throw back the Union right flank under John Schofield, one of Hood's classmates, and Joseph Hooker, Hood launched a terrific attack that was so ferocious that Hooker thought he had been attacked by a much larger force, reporting to his commander, William T. Sherman, that 3 Confederate corps were in his front. This caused problems in the Union High Command because there were only 3 Confederate corps in the whole Army of Tennessee, and Sherman knew all 3 couldn't have been attacking Hooker. Hood didn't take part in the throwing back of Union forces attacking the mountain that made the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain famous. When Sherman decided to flank Johnston, the Army fell back again, this time on a river just north of Atlanta. Georgia citizens and politicians were incredibly concerned about the approaching armies, and Senator Benjamin Hill went to speak with President Davis. Johnston eventually withdrew across the river. At about that same time, Davis was informed of Johnston's movement. Senator Hill delivered the message that Johnston said he could hold out north of the Chattahoochee River for a month. He had only lasted a little over a week. This would be the last straw for Davis, who felt leaving Johnston in command of the army would only result in more ground being given up. To make certain that Johnston wouldn't protect Atlanta, Davis sent his military advisor Braxton Bragg to visit with Johnston, and while his emissary traveled to Georgia, Davis went deep in thought about who to replace Johnston with. Davis wrote to Robert E. Lee and asked him a question. "Johnston has failed. It seems necessary to relieve him at once. Who should succeed him? What think you of Hood for the position?" Lee replied, "It is a bad time to release the commander of an army situated as that of Tennessee. We may lose Atlanta and the army too. Hood is a bold fighter. I am doubtful as to the other qualities necessary." Later that day, Lee wrote to Davis again, saying it would be better to concentrate all of the cavalry in Mississippi and Tennessee on Sherman's communications. Bragg's assignment to visit Johnston was only to gain ammunition against Johnston. Bragg arrived at Johnston's headquarters and they talked for 12 hours, and according to Bragg, Johnston didn't ask for advice, nor did Bragg offer any. They discussed the condition of the army, which was much worse than Bragg and Davis believed, and the next day, Johnston brought his corps commanders to headquarters so that Bragg could ask them any questions or if he needed any clarification about the state of the army or the goings-on in the campaign. Bragg insisted that the visit was unofficial, as he was going to visit Stephen D. Lee in Mississippi, but he would meet with the corps commanders separately. Bragg only met with 2 of Johnston's supporters, Hood and Joseph Wheeler. Hood insisted that Johnston had refused to act offensively against Sherman and that Hood repeatedly asked to attack, but his suggestions were waved off by the army commander. Hood also gave Bragg a letter that attacked Johnston as an army commander, discrediting him as a strategist. Bragg would write to Davis, "If any change is made, Lieutenant General Hood would give unlimited satisfaction, and my estimate of him, always high, has been raised by his conduct in this campaign." Davis wanted to give Johnston one more chance to assure him that the Army of Tennessee would defend Atlanta. He telegraphed Johnston, "I wish to hear from you as to present situation and your plans of operation so specifically as will enable me to anticipate events." Johnston responded, "As the enemy double our number, we must be on the defensive. My plan of operations must therefore depend on the enemy. It is mainly to watch for an opportunity to fight to advantage. We are trying to put Atlanta in condition to be held for a day or two by the Georgia militia, that army movements may be freer and wider." The message astonished Davis. Was Johnston going to hold Atlanta for a day or two? Without any solid stance provided by Johnston as to the defense of the city, the message signaled the death knell for Johnston's time as commander of the Army of Tennessee. On July 17th, as Johnston sat at his headquarters 3 miles north of Atlanta, a courier brought him a telegram from Samuel Cooper. It read, "Lieutenant General J.B. Hood has been commissioned to the temporary rank of general under the late law of Congress. I am directed by the Secretary of War to inform you that as you have failed to arrest the advance of the enemy to the vicinity of Atlanta, far in the interior of Georgia, and express no confidence of the Army and Department of Tennessee, which you will immediately turn over to General Hood." Out of courtesy, Hood asked Johnston to stay on until the fate of Atlanta had been decided, but Johnston knew he could not disobey a direct order. Hood was now in command of the Army of Tennessee, and tasked with defending Atlanta.